35 years. And so he worked that job, and we kids had to work the farm. And one of the blessings was that as a strong Baptist, you did not work on Sundays. Anyway, that was the part I missed about how he provided the income. Because one of the family rules was that we never borrow money unless it were for medical costs or education. So that was good. Okay, in the little town of Bath, we did have a school. It was a high school, grades K through 13, and a PG course, postgraduate course. And that was for those who didn't make it all the way in the other 13 classes. And during that period of time, I was very active in the school, learned to play the flute, and I still have that flute, but I don't play it anymore. So I was a member of the band and so forth, played sports. Fortunately, my parents allowed me to take the time out. I played basketball and track. That accounted for several broken noses. It was during that time that, pardon me, overcame the fear of girls. And I even graduated from high school. But there was one disturbance period during that period. In my senior year, I became a statistic in the tail end of the polio epidemic. And then I had polio for the last half of that year. And so I ended up in the hospital for a period of time, and then I went to the polio home in Ithaca, New York, which actually Wendy was familiar with Wendy Weeks.
Wendy Fields?
Fields was familiar with that place. So we got better there. Okay, then came life in school. After finally graduating, I decided that I needed to go to college. So in the state of New York was a college called Alfred University, where they had a state school of ceramics. And that was a tuition-free college course for in-state students who had passed the Regents exam course. And I thought that'd be kind of interesting. And it certainly was reasonable, cost-wise. So I enrolled there and enrolled in to become a ceramic engineer. And that's when I joined the fraternity, and that's when I met Jonathan. And but I also played sports. I ran track during that time. And life was so good that I needed to get my grades up a level. So Johnson and I got married in between my junior and senior year. And my grades did go up one full level. Because I wasn't traveling to the library, so to speak, every night. Anyway, and believe it or not, in the middle 19s, I graduated from college. And of course, we were married in '94, and believe it or not, we're still going strong on that marriage.
94?
No.
1994.
54 we were married.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was another day.
That was 1894.
Yeah, it's in 1994, and we've been going for 64 years straight since that time. Pardon me? Anyway, the family, of course, came along. We have 4 children. Our oldest daughter is Laura. She got her degree as a biologist, and went on further to become a minister. And she was a minister for a short time in the Baptist Church in Pennsylvania. And then she got married, and they now live up in Auburn, Maine. Then number 2 came along, a year and a half later, Leslie. And she went to East Carolina, and thank goodness for the Carolina school system, because all of our kids took advantage of the tuition situation. And she became an art selector. Then Clayton came along, number 3. He went to vet school, became a veterinarian. And then Melanie, number 4, came along, and she went to Western Carolina, and she's a CPA. And all of these kids right at this point have produced 9 grandchildren. Now we'll talk a little bit about...
There's 10 grandchildren and 1 great.
Well, I seem to be missing one. No, I didn't. I'm going to hear about it tonight. Anyway, after college, well, it became time to work. And so my first job was with a company called Mosaic Tile Company in Zanesville, Ohio. And they manufactured ceramic tile for bathrooms and kitchens and floors and anywhere where you use ceramic tile. They also manufactured the equipment that went with it, the stools and the sinks and all that sort of thing. So I worked for them for about 5 years, learning to manufacture ceramic tile and also learning to lay tile. And I developed a number of good friendships in their bathrooms. I couldn't say no, so I would install their bathrooms for them. Then that went on from 1955 to 1960. Then in 1961, I saw the need to change jobs, and so I joined Armstrong Company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And you probably are thinking, well, Armstrong Cork produced glass products. Well, they did. They had 2 or 3 bottle plants. And so I was asked to go to Millville, New Jersey as a chief chemist for that plant. Worked there for 2 years. And then they gave me another permission, and we stayed another 6 years in Millville, New Jersey. And I guess, again, that was as a plant chemist. Then in 1968, I saw the need to change again. And besides, a good friend of mine who at that time worked for PPG Industries was asking me to come to work for him because I'd had a lot of experience in the glass container industry and needed a consultant to satisfy some of the customer needs of the PPG people. So I resigned from there and went to work for PPG Industries. And my job with them was to develop a research program at Lancaster for development in glass. And so after, let's see, after about 4 or 5 years doing that, they asked me to go to Millville, New Jersey. Again, a place of nondescript, but a good place to raise kids. One of the things I remember about Millville, New Jersey was the quantity of mosquitoes that they raised down there. One of the funniest jokes that I'd ever seen regarding that showed a flock of Canada geese being chased off the island with a flock of, with a buzz of mosquitoes. Anyway, we had the last of our children there, but that particular job gave me all kinds of experience in the glass container industry. And so, since Armstrong produced chemicals that went into that industry, they asked me to become a consultant in that end of the business. So for the next 6, 7 years, I traveled the U.S. all over in Canada and some in South America doing glass technology consulting. And that gave me a world of experience about glass and all the problems and so forth that are associated with it. Then in 1994, why, we saw the light again to retire. And at that point, we moved to, well, we stayed in Lexington for a while, but then many of my friends in the industry had just known that I did consulting, and so they asked me if I would do some more. So I continued for the next 10 years doing glass technology consulting, not only in the United States, but primarily in the world. And that activity took me to, took me to Germany, Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, Japan, China, Venezuela. Took me all over the world doing that consulting work. And that was a real eye-opener because I had just become acquainted in Japan with the co-ed bathrooms. I'll never forget the first venture at an airport in the co-ed bathroom. I was using the facility and standing next to the you-know-what, and all of a sudden I heard a click, 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 click. I thought, what's that? And I turned around and here comes a young Japanese woman out of her little cubicle up to the sink, which was right next to where I was. So what's a man to do? You just kind of stare straight ahead, shut your eyes. Anyway, that was one of my first experiences in Japan. Anyhow, Saudi Arabia, of course, that was a country of different colors. At that time, the religious problems were very much aware. But over there, they transported you everywhere. You stayed in motels that they would approve of, and but they did treat you right. The food was good. Then in Taiwan, I did some consulting there a few years, and that, of course, was another experience with the co-ed bathrooms. But I was used to it by then. But I will have to tell you another experience that was kind of comical. We had just built this plant in Jiayi, Taiwan. And you know, in a new plant, the doors are tight. You open it, you got to tuck on them, things like that. Well, this one time I went into the men's restroom, and you could look under the door and see if any were in use. So I looked under the door, and then nobody was using them. So I grabbed a hold of the door, and it stuck. I thought, well, brand new door, it stuck. So I grabbed a hold of the door, and I gave it a mighty yank. And what happened? But out popped a young Taiwanese man, bloomers a-flying. Anyway, I learned somehow to say, pardon me, excuse me, in English, so that he understood. So anyway, that was a certain amount of our work experience. I might finish by telling you a little bit about our Lake Lure experience, which has been a marvelous experience. We became acquainted with Lake Lure through a person that many of you might know, Bill and Pam Beeson. They lived on the lake, and he and I were jointly entertaining some Japanese, and he agreed to have them stay at his home overnight, and we took them out to dinner. And so I got a great look of the $1 Million Point, which is where he lived on the lake. And so Bill said, you ought to get interested in this lake because it's a great place to live. So we did. And after a couple of years, we found a lot, and we purchased it and built our home there. But in the process of doing all this, I learned that it's very necessary to be able to say no. And I did not learn to say no. So during the period of time that we were in that phase, we became very active in the community. We were on building teams through the church. I was a volunteer fire department for 7 years. I was a member of the LLLOA, Everybody know what that is?
No.
Lake
still
owners,
are.
lakefront owners, no, Lake Lure Lakefront Owners Association. We were active in that. And then we were very active in the Flowering Bridge activity, which is still going on. And then, of course, we've been members of 2 churches, which have been, for the most part, good experiences. And then we learned to play tennis better than most, and pickleball, of all things, which is still a good game, still fun to play. And so, those are some of the activities
You
that.
served on town council.
Pardon me?
You served 4 years
Oh,
on
yeah,
town
I forgot that. I was on the
council.
I'm sorry, I had building team, no, helping neighborhood. No, that's right, it was town council for 4 years.
Right.
And that was a royal education for me. Because
Yeah, that's right.
fortunately, before that, I was on the Lake Advisory Committee, which was headed by Bob Washburn. And he, of course, had been born and raised here. He knew more